So, with Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire out, also real fast, shameless spoiler. My review of that movie doesn't have a lot of spoilers to it. Is up on Patreon. If you want to check that review out, as well as my reviews for X-Men '97 and Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, just hit the link below. Head on over to my Patreon. Hit the first tier, and that'll give you access to that and polls that affect videos here on YouTube as well as over there on Patreon. Anyway, so sorry for that shameless plug, but we're moving forward. But the point of this is that with Godzilla X Kong out in theaters now and in force, the big question is, what's next for the Monsterverse? So far, the Monsterverse consists of 5 movies, 1 TV show, and a whole lot of comics that, not to spoil anything, look like they're actually having an effect now, as opposed to previously, where it felt like the comics and some of the novels were getting retconned every other day. But now it looks like, at least to some extent, the comics are actually playing a role in the films. So I think that's kind of cool. But now we leave to the question, what's next for the Monsterverse? Like, what could be next for this universe? And you really have to wonder how this goes. Like, how this is going to play out next. Adam Wingard says that he wants to do at least one more movie before parting ways with the Monsterverse. So we can throw... If this movie does well enough box office-wise, which I have a feeling it already will, this film will probably, spawn a third film, and hopefully Adam Wingard can end his Monsterverse trilogy. But what do you do now? Like, I'm not going to spoil anything of how the movie ends. I will say, though, and this isn't much of a spoiler because I'm pretty sure a lot of people figured this out, this is more of a Kong movie than it is a Godzilla and Kong movie. I mean, Godzilla's there, but he doesn't really play a lot. And that's been kind of the thing since Godzilla vs. Kong, is that Godzilla doesn't... These past 2 films have been more about Kong than they have been about Godzilla. So, therein lies the rub. Now, I forgive it. I forgive Godzilla, these past 2 films being Godzilla light, because, well, A, Godzilla's got a shit ton of movies, and Kong really hasn't had a lot of films. And let me rephrase by saying he hasn't also had a lot of good films either. Like, the last major film he had was Skull Island. So, I don't mind that, even though he has to piggyback with Godzilla's name on it, I don't mind that Kong gets a few more movies. So, there is that. And also Godzilla a few months ago got a certain film that swept the box office as well as won an Oscar. So it's a little more forgivable that we didn't have there was a lack of Godzilla here because Godzilla just got his spotlight. Might as well let Kong take center stage and play the supporting role. Godzilla already had like a few months of fame and fortune, so why not? Anyway, so where do we go now with the Monsterverse? Like, what should be next for the Monsterverse? I know a lot of people are saying, like, oh, they should bring in more Toho monsters, they should do this, and this. I'm going to give my thoughts on it. Starting off, I think it's kind of... While I wouldn't mind a new Toho monster in here, like a new legendary version of a Toho monster, I'm kind of fine with them being light. But the thing is, I want it light. I want it really light. Like, I don't want it like every other film, because for King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong, we had, in those 2 films alone, we had Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, and Mechagodzilla in those 2 films alone. So we've had a reliance on those monsters. And with Scar King and Shimo, it's really cool to have new monsters in here. And just saying, there is a few other monsters that show up from the comics. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, so I don't mind if we get new original monsters. But I think like a good balance. Like, I'm not saying every film needs to have a Toho monster. Maybe have like a Toho version. And I'm certain that Toho will be more than willing to play fair with Legendary. Maybe not so much Warner Brothers, but Legendary definitely. Remember, the Monsterverse is the reason we have new Godzilla films from Toho. This whole thing of like, there needs to be a divide, like there needs to be division between, oh, you must love -1 and hate, New Empire because it's dumb and silly and, has no place here. I'm like, so you're not, so clearly you've never seen the Showa movies. Or any Godzilla film. But that's what I'm saying, is that there doesn't need to be division in here. Toho can handle the dark, serious Godzilla films. Legendary can handle the dumb, stupid shit we love in Godzilla. That's a great have your cake and eat it too kind of thing, isn't it? Like, it's a great, like, hey, I get to have this, this, and this, and then, like, have fun, right? I'm sorry if I want to have fun in my giant monster movie now and again. I mean, yes, arguably, yes, it's without a doubt -1 is one of the best Godzilla films ever. But it doesn't hurt to be stupid fun every now and again. Anyway, so I don't mind that we have this big. I don't mind if we keep the big bombastic tone of Godzilla of these movies. It's like Godzilla vs. Kong basically solidified. Yeah, let's just be dumb. Let's just be dumb monster movies and focus more on the monsters. And I don't mind that. In fact, it really does feel like in here that this movie feels like the next film could be even less humans and even more monsters. But getting back to the point is that, like, Toho might be... I'm pretty sure Toho would be more than open to letting them use these monsters. Like, they were kind of leery about letting them use certain monsters for a while, but now it's like, oh yeah, cool, yeah. I'm sure Toho will let them use certain monsters now. Like, as to what monsters? I don't want it to be just villains. I know everyone and their mom wants Destroya as a legendary version of Destroya. And yeah, sure, that's cool. But, like, how about some other monsters? How about, like, monsters that aren't really villains? Like, or they're lesser villains and you can just have cool versions of them in the film and be, like, supporting roles like Rodan was. Like, I'd like to see Monsterverse version of Titanosaurus, or, King Caesar, or, like Anguirus. Not every legendary monster needs to be, like, a new version of a villain. Although, yeah, I feel like at some point we are going to get Destroya, or at the very least Gigan. Because you've already done the big two already for Godzilla's Rogues, like, 2 of the big 3 of Godzilla's Rogues Gallery, which is Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla. But you don't want to, I think, like, also Legendary learned of killing off Ghidorah was probably not a good idea, but then again, they didn't know if this franchise was going to last long or not. So, I can see why. So, I'm sure, like, if they want to continue this universe, I would imagine saving Destroya for a later film, maybe even Wingard's 3rd film. But anyway, yeah. So using those monsters would be use them sparingly. I like the idea of having new blood in here, like having new blood for these monsters, like having Shimo and Scar King was really cool. And when you see the movie, they do pretty well. So, new monsters, new villains would be cool. And just have occasionally new monster, the old monsters show up too. Now, as for how the movie should go forward, I think we don't need to do Godzilla x Kong. Like, it's kind of obvious that, like, Kong has kind of had like I said earlier, that Kong's kind of had a, front and center stage for a bit. Maybe what we could do now is like what we did before, is like have Godzilla and Kong have separate movies now. Like, maybe now that we've established that the Monsterverse is probably the second most viable cinematic universe, right behind the MCU, and God knows if the Twisted Childhood universe, how well that's going to do. Warner Brothers is going to look at that cinematic universe, seeing that James Gunn's DC universe is still going to need time to get off the ground. And that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That, like, the Warner Brothers universe that they didn't have any faith in is now technically the second most profitable cinematic universe, right behind the MCU. Funny, right? So maybe now that we've established that the Monsterverse has, legs to stand on, I think what could be done is give Godzilla and Kong separate movies again, rather than have them ape off of each other. Pun not intended. So, and technically speaking, I read somewhere that that the New Empire was originally meant to be like a Son of Kong movie, but it got changed to a Godzilla Kong movie. So maybe we can do films now with Kong in the Hollow Earth and Godzilla on the surface, and focus on two separate events, and then maybe bring them together like as an Avengers kind of film, like they do with New Empire. So have it like as a, I guess you could ape off the phrase, Avengers level threat, like Save Destroya for another film, and have Godzilla battle some new monster, and Kong in Hollow Earth battling another threat to Hollow Earth. It'd be kind of cool actually if you did for the Kong movie, because maybe have it that like Kong battles humans who have built like mecha, like they kind of do this in the prequel to A New Empire called The Hunted, where this guy builds a mech, like almost like a proto Jaeger suit. It's not a Jaeger, but it's kind of like it's a battle suit to fight monsters. So maybe do like have it that humans are coming down into Hollow Earth with high-tech weaponry to poach monsters from Hollow Earth, and they have like mech suits and high-grade weapons, and Kong has to defend Hollow Earth from these humans, and have to have Kong fight robots. Maybe even have like a loose reference to Mechanic Kong too. That would be my idea for a Kong movie. For Godzilla, that's where you could bring in the Toho monster. Like if you want to do another one, maybe have Gigan, or maybe you can do the Monsterverse version, because you've already established that Ghidorah is an alien. Maybe have it that Ghidorah was sent by the Monsterverse version of the Exilians, or the Simians, the shape-shifting apes. And have it that kind of like a secret, do a secret invasion, but better, right? In both comics and live-action miniseries. That's where I think you could really pull off something cool. Is with, you can do that's where you can do the Toho one. Have it like they show up and Gigan is the big villain, and then you have Kong's movie in Hollow Earth, Godzilla's film on the surface. Then you do for the next film of this new series, you bring them back together again and have them battle. That's where you can do Destroya or another monster. That's just that's just kind of my train of thought. And then you can the other thing, once we get to another, I guess you could call it a phase. How about focus on bringing in some other monsters into the Monsterverse, like maybe a solo film of a new monster. You could that's the thing about the Monsterverse, is that it's very fresh. So why not, now that we've fully established the Monsterverse, maybe create a new monster that isn't an IP, a known IP, bring in a new monster and have it be a part of the Monsterverse. Hell, I even say maybe even fold. I've said this before. I've said this multiple times. How about folding in the Meg and Rampage into the Monsterverse? It would fit those films. Even though I really enjoy Rampage, I don't give a shit about the Meg movies. But maybe you could fold them into that universe, and it would actually be so seamless. Putting the Rampage and the Meg franchises in that universe. Yeah. They already feel like Monsterverse movies to begin with, so and they're already doing the Meg 3. So yeah, by Meg 3 just say, oh yeah, Meg is part of the Meg is part of the Monsterverse. Rampage, as much as I'd love it, it has gotten nothing since. So I'd say, since the Meg is also popular, I would say, yeah, just fold the Meg, and I would care a little more if the Meg folded into the Monsterverse. Anyway. And again, it wouldn't hurt to maybe create a new monster that is exclusively for have a movie and focus on a new monster and have it in the Monsterverse. Rather than have it be this way, Legendary has their own monster IP, so they don't have to share with Godzilla, with Toho, or Kong, or whatever the rights are with Legendary and Warner Brothers with Kong. This way, you can have, Legendary can have a monster of their own and do a movie on them. I would even say, Maybe even bring in some other monsters and give Monsterverse versions of them. I've said before that the Radosaurus from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms could easily work in this universe. I think the Radosaurus, like, have it as like a subspecies of Godzilla. I think that would be kind of cool. Do a remake of that. I would also say, like, maybe bring in some other 50s monsters. Some of them are under Universal, so, like, they can't use Tarantula or the Giant Mantis. I don't even think... Yeah, they can't use the ants from them either. Because I thought it was a Warner Brothers movie. Turns out it was a Fox movie, so that's under Disney. But yeah, I think the Radosaurus is under Warner Brothers last time I checked. I would even say, like, maybe the Giant Behemoth. I can't remember who has the rights to that. Maybe even... Actually, it'd be kind of cool if, I think the movie's in public domain, so you could just take this movie and just run with it, is War of the Colossal Beast. So that would be, like, have the Colossal, like, the Cyclops Man, have him in here, have a new version of that. Be a great way to, that'd be cool, too. Maybe even do a new version of Earth versus the Spider. I mean, not the body horror one, although the one with the remake with Dan Aykroyd is pretty fun. But I'm saying, like, have it like a giant spider again, like in the original film, or the giant Gila monster. I think that's public domain too, so they could just fucking take that one too. Anyway, so the Monsterverse, the future of the Monsterverse looks pretty bright so far, and I'm just throwing out ideas at this point. So you guys tell me in the comments below, what would you want to see next for the Monsterverse? Like, what do you want to see next happen in the Monsterverse? Do you think Godzilla and Kong should get separate movies by this point now? Do you think they should focus more on Toho monsters or original monsters, or strike a balance? And would you want to see, like, the Meg and Rampage show up? I know a lot of people say, like, well, what about, like, Pacific Rim? Oh, they don't want to... After how bad Uprising failed, Legendary does not want to touch Pacific Rim anymore. Like, after how bad Uprising shit the bed, they're not even going to bother touching it. Now, Pacific Rim in the comics would be different. Like, my friend Matt Denian and I have talked about, like, how there may be a good chance that we may get Pacific Rim versus Godzilla in the Legendary comics. That could actually happen after how well the Justice League Godzilla Kong crossover has been doing. But I digress. So that's kind of like, what would you want to see next for the Monsterverse? Just comment below, let me know. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say about all of this. So, and it's just a good time to be a Monsterverse fan, right? Or just kaiju fan in general. But other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.